Long before Ted Bundy became an iconic true crime subject, Jack the Ripper occupied the thoughts and nightmares of many millions and still does. Who among us didn't grow up singing a children's ditty about Lizzie Borden murdering her parents with an axe over a century after it allegedly happened? Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Agatha Christie, and the authors of thousands of 16th century crime reports, 19th century penny dreadfuls, and the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew series recognized and banked on the ever-present public interest in stories about crime. And what is the nightly news but a brief review of the day's local true crime? All that has changed in the past few decades is that newer forms of media give us faster and easier accessibility, oftentimes with near-instant reporting and greater global reach. We can stream on-demand documentaries and podcasts not just about local crime stories, but also about crimes committed in India, Australia, Ireland, Israel, without ever leaving the comfort of our couches. So no, the obsession isn't new, and neither is the societal preoccupation with notorious criminals. It's just easier to feed. And even though the average person may have access to more true crime media than ever, it is also a misperception that it has become inescapable. After all, according to Pacific Content, in 2022, only 17% of the top podcasts on the charts were true crime shows, and Edison Research reported that in the same year, true crime ranked 4th in the most popular podcast genres. In other words, it only feels like you're surrounded by it if you're immersed inside a true crime bubble by your own choice. As with true crime's impact on our mental and emotional health, cautions against the genre tend not to be backed by empirical evidence. More study is needed to determine what effect, if any, consumption of true crime stories may have on our psychological well-being. Interestingly, there is existing data, some of which is captured in this very anthology, that suggests the true crime genre is beneficial to society. This collection before you is proof positive that without this genre, advocates like me would be at a loss, struggling to tell the stories of the neglected victims of crime and victims of the criminal justice system. I was in law school in 1999 when my younger brother's best friend, Adnan Syed, was convicted of the murder of his classmate, Hae-Min Lee. Adnan was just 17 years old at the time of his arrest and maintained his innocence from the day the police hauled him in handcuffs from his bed. I believed in his innocence and hoped in vain for 15 years that appellate courts would give Adnan justice before I finally turned to media, true crime media. The podcast Serial brought Adnan's case much-needed attention, awareness, funding, and support, and made his story an international phenomenon, but didn't exonerate him. So I wrote a book about the case, produced an HBO series about it, and launched my own podcast, Undisclosed, with attorneys Susan Simpson and Colin Miller, which first examined Adnan's case and then went on to investigate and report on 24 other innocence cases. Half of the defendants in those cases, including Adnan, are now home, thanks to our work. And it was true crime media that made all the difference. Our investigations and reporting uncovered new evidence, including witnesses who had never been spoken to and leads that were never considered before. Through Undisclosed and many other shows like it, we were able to educate an audience of hundreds of millions about how the criminal justice system really works. In the past decade, Americans have become more knowledgeable than ever about police brutality, prosecutorial misconduct, junk forensic science, institutional racism, the phenomenon of false confessions, the impact of cash bail on the poor, and the prison industrial complex, and nearly all of this education can be attributed to true crime media. And so we have this collection before us, a group of true crime stories that will intrigue, but also enrage, fascinate, but also educate. We begin with a look at what this nation reckons with, or rather should be reckoning with, through stories everyone should know. The indifference with which violence against Black girls and women is met, a crisis of thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women across the nation, the lynching of a young Black man sitting unsolved for decades due to police inattention, the untold tales of physical and sexual abuse common to over 90% of incarcerated women, the rise in murderous hate crimes against Asian Americans. These are the stories that usually stay hidden. The ones that have only recently begun to emerge after centuries of true crime focused on the success and power of law enforcement, on the honor and respectability of the system and all who serve in it. These are the stories that have been buried beneath an illusion of American exceptionalism, that are still fighting to be told in an era when teaching the truth about our national history of racism and racial injustice is being outlawed state by state.